Hi, I'm Andy Dabilis, here with NDTV in Brussels with the Prime Minister of Latvia, Valdis Dombrovskis, who has a hard task indeed, trying to convince the European Union to release €1.2 billion in another round of rescue money for Latvia, which is facing serious financial problems, almost on the point of collapse, I might say. Mr. Prime Minister, why should the EU help Latvia?
First of all, we are talking about agreed macroeconomic stabilization package where the total amount is €7.5 billion, of which EU is contributing the largest share. Mm-hmm. Certainly we appreciate the effort Commission and also some EU member states are taking to assemble this international loan package, and as we saw from today, there are also positive signals from the Commission that they will be able to continue with disbursement of next tranches.
But in order to do that, you have to convince the EU and the IMF that you're making significant cuts. You want to slash salaries, reduce the minimum wage, all of which would hurt working people. Where is that €7.5 billion going if it's not going to them?
First of all, we must understand the macroeconomic background. In previous years, even though we had a double-digit growth, previous governments did not even balance the budget. So right now we have to make extremely huge fiscal adjustments, somewhere on the scale of more than 10% of GDP. And in order to do this, of course, we need to do a major adjustment. And still in this and next year, we are going to have quite significant budget deficits with the aim to have budget deficit below 3% by 2011 and 2012.
Below 3%, you're at 9.2%. The IMF wants you to go to 5%. You're asking more for 7%. Which goal do you think you could reach and by when?
The problem is now that we agreed not to try to chase some kind of a deficit figure, because that's what we had been doing for the last half of the year. Mm-hmm. When the program was launched, the recession assumption was 5%. In March, when I took over the government, it was 12% recession. Now it's 18%. So we agreed that we stop chasing this moving target. Instead, we agreed on the amount of measures we need to deliver for this year. And if we deliver this amount of measures, we can continue with receiving an international loan package.
Is it fair for the EU to put such harsh requirements on you? The EU benchmark is 3% of the deficit. Italy, France, and Greece can't meet that. Why should Latvia?
I think our problem is that we are not able to finance our budget deficit from international financial markets. In this terms, we are of course dependent on the conditions set by international loan providers. Of course, the terms are quite harsh, but we do not have much of an option than to actually meet those terms.
Do you think it's fair, though, that they put these conditions on you? They gave much more than €7.5 million to the banks, and that required nothing of them. The banks won't even lend the money.
You cannot necessarily compare this international loan package with a bank rescue. One of the reasons we actually had to turn to this international package that we had to rescue also our largest independent commercial bank. The problem with banks is, on one hand, if those are systemic banks, system-building banks, then if you let those banks fail, it may have a domino effect to other banks, to enterprises which had accounts in those banks, and in fact, the consequences for economy may be even much worse. From this point of view, it's quite understandable that you rescue those banks which are important for the financial system. So another question is, do you need to rescue the bankers?
Well, that's an important question for people in the streets. Don't understand macroeconomic indicators. They just understand they're making €200 a month. How are you going to prevent a recurrence of the riots you had in January if indeed these social cuts are instituted? You get what you want from the EU and the IMF, but the working class people standard of living falls.
On this program. So now we are working quite intensively with social partners, with trade unions, with employers' confederation, with local governments, to actually reach an agreement on how we are moving with this 500 million lots package.
That's 715 million euro. That's a lot of money to cut from a budget.
Well, that's quite a significant cut. It's 20% of what's remaining budget for the second half of this year. And certainly if you subtract some expenditure which is not subject to reduction, like interest payments, like payments to international organizations, like social fund, which we are trying to secure as much as we can, then it means very severe cuts to the whatever is left, and this is on top of 2 rounds of budget cuts we had for this year's budget already.
Your GDP fell 18% in the first quarter. There's some predictions it might fall 20%. Unemployment's 13%. You hear figures like 50% being thrown around. Those are draconian measures. Is there any fear you're destroying Latvia in order to save it?
Measures are, of course, are very severe. There's no doubt about this. But every alternative we currently have is just worse.
What is the alternative?
One alternative is to do nothing and not to receive the international loan package. In this case, we will just go bankrupt.
Didn't turn out so bad for Iceland.
Still, of course, if you look at the consequences which they had also in Iceland, I think they were very severe. And if we have an option to avoid it, we will avoid it.
Iceland collapsed. They're on the verge of joining the EU. You're hoping to even join the Eurozone by 2012 or 13. Do you think that process can be accelerated?
We're basing our stabilization program on the current Maastricht criteria. There had been talks here and there about simplifying Maastricht criteria, accelerated accession to the Eurozone. Well, we are not against this, but we are not building our plans on this.
Do you feel you're being preached to? The Swedish finance minister said you have to meet the reforms that the IMF and the EU wants. But isn't he really interested in saving the interests of Swedish banks who invested heavily in Latvia?
Swedish banks are certainly quite heavily exposed to the Latvia, and were part of the problem when we had an overheated economy and way too easy credit. And now, of course, they have also their own interest to preserve the stability. But this happens to be also our interest to preserve the stability in the country.
Some economists want you to devalue the lat. They think it'll help people. The banks don't. They fear it'll cause a panic among investors and cause a ripple effect throughout the Baltics and Eastern Europe. So what do? You're kind of between a rock and a hard place, aren't you? With
this devaluation, we do not see this as an option. It's absolutely not clear how this is going to help people, because then the real purchasing of people will deteriorate even faster than with the budget cuts we are doing. And experience is that in many countries it tends to go out of control, the devaluation. Plus, it's not even solving the budget deficit problem. So,
social unrest brought down the last government. If this doesn't work, is yours going to fall too?
Currently, we have an agreement with social partners on this package. We have an agreement with European Commission, so we think we are on track to actually deliver those budget cuts and to be on track with the program and to maintain social stability.
Well, you remember the European Parliament, the Budgets Committee. You're a physicist too. Is it going to take physics to get us out of this?
Somehow it happens that in turbulent times, people with a physics background takes charge in Latvia. Our former prime minister, which happened to be also the first prime minister in independent Latvia, was with a physics background. Our finance minister now, who used to be a prime minister, is with a physics background. So,
thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I'm Andy Dabilis with NTV here in Brussels, the Prime Minister of Latvia. Some economists are calling his country the new Argentina. He's hoping they'll recover and people will be looking for the new Latvia.